Hey everybody, I'm Mike Clayton. Welcome to USA Wrestling's Moments Off the Mat. This episode will be with special guest Pat Marques from NeuroAthlete. Welcome to the show, Pat.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. It's good to be here.
I know you got a good background in the sport of wrestling. Why don't you give us a little bit of a history about your background?
Sure. I grew up in Indiana and started wrestling in high school. Fell in love with the sport. I was what I would call good, not great. Um, and I had only started when I was like a sophomore. But when it's time to go to college, I was going to go to Indiana University, and I really wanted to keep wrestling. And so I was able to get on the team there and the coach at the time was Jim Humphreys. So this is like, pre-Civil War era, right? This is, seems like a million years ago now, but this is like mid to late 80s. And Jim Humphreys was the head coach. And my other coaches were, this is awesome. So Jim Humphreys, Bill Scheer, Andre Metzger, and Joe McFarland.
Pretty good staff.
Right. Yeah. So that was a cool time. And I don't know if anybody remembers a guy named Brian Dolph, but he was like 150 pounder. He won, I think it was in 90, he won the NCAA. And so it was really a good team of guys just really kind of framed, the sport for sure, but also wrestling in Indiana really just kind of framed a lot of things for the rest of my life. I ended up going into the Army, going through ROTC. And so I was in the Army for 20 years, retired, and most of that time was spent in Special Forces. And this sport just really kind of made me who I was, and so love it. So it's been awesome in these last couple of years when meeting you and getting back into the sport in a different way, and I've really enjoyed that.
It's funny. I know I feel like a special trust when I started working with NeuroAthlete and with you and Grove and Mary. And you do when you know somebody's got that background in wrestling, and Grove has a lot in the martial arts side of things and combatives. It's that these people know what your body's going through and how to take care of you. And I think that's why, like today's topic, where we start to talk a little bit about the visual training, it's not something that I think a lot of us are too familiar with, and why it's important. Is this a good time to maybe segue into that concept?
When I got out of the Army back about 2011, that's when I met Dr. Grove. And at the time I volunteered. Well, I was going through some school. I knew I wanted to do something with like health and fitness and that kind of thing, strength and conditioning. And so I was going through different schools and certifications, eventually got an exercise science degree. But when I first got out and met Dr. Grove, he had a nonprofit working with wounded, ill and injured soldiers. And so that's how I kind of got into it and initially into kind of a rehab or exercise therapy aspect. That's when I started learning the reason we're called NeuroAthlete is because we take a very neurological based approach to training, and really all training is brain training. We just don't realize it. Any kind of movement training, anything like that has it all comes from your brain. When you go to reach for a cup of coffee or shoot a double leg, your brain has initiated that action. So all training is neurological. So what we try to do then I've just gotten a ton of schooling in this and the neurological approach to training and kind of like rehab or therapy. But what we try and do is go, well, what are the best things we can use to really, make you better faster, right? How do we shortcut things? So if we take a neurological approach to training, we can improve in skills that we don't normally think we can improve in, which is really what we're talking about today with vision and your vestibular system.
If we're talking all training is brain training, a lot of times we think that if we drill our athletes in the same move over and over, that's muscle memory. And you guys kind of helped me learn that muscle memory really isn't a thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, your muscles are stupid, really. Right? They only do what the brain tells them to do. But what we mean by muscle memory really is ingrained motor patterns, right? So for a particular movement. And so that's really when the term muscle memory gets used, that's what we're talking about. And so when we have dysfunctional or bad movement patterns, right? Say whether it's a posture or how an athlete, how a wrestler, um, his or her stance, right, or how they shoot a double leg, or how they tie up, or things like that, then we have to relearn those, right? And that is, even though we don't think of it as brain training, it really is brain training. When you have to, relearn something in a new way, that is retraining your nervous system. I know you did, yeah, you did a webinar with Dr. Higgins on like joint mobility and things like that. We'll talk about that briefly in here because it's relative to the conversation, and I'll kind of explain how things like that can actually make your bigger movements, like shooting a double leg, actually better.
And we'll make sure that the link for the original video from Dr. Grove is in the subject line or in the description box down below on this video. Thanks.
Great.
So we're talking visual side of this today, of the whole big piece and how everything communicates. We're going to work on the visual side. What do we need to do, and what do we need to know getting started?
Well, let me do a little screen share here. So we're talking about vision and vestibular training, not something it really that's talked about much in the coaching or strength and conditioning world, but it is actually super important, and it is done by higher level athletes. They don't talk about it much because if you're a really high level athlete, are you going to talk about those little things that are getting you that 3 to 5% better performance? No, you're going to keep that to yourself because you're a competitor, right? So a lot of these things aren't really talked about, but we like to break that myth and go ahead and start talking about them. So this is the easiest way to kind of conceptualize this. We all need to think of our brain, right? This is for movement and movement competency, right? So athletic skill, regardless of the sport, right? Think of your brain as a GPS. So when you're in your car, right, and your car has that GPS and you've got your little map up there, or you're using your phone, whatever, the GPS is telling you where you are. So you want it to be accurate, right? Now, for a GPS to be accurate, it has to have 3 satellites, right? So you can triangulate a position and know exactly where you are on the ground. And that's how we get a good accuracy in the GPS when we're in a car or we've, carrying our phone around or whatever. And so our body's the same way. For your brain to have a really good concept of where you are in time and space and how well to move, it has satellites that help us get that information. So this is what we talk about, are you training your satellites that give you this information? So there's 3 that we're going to talk about today. Well, one real briefly. So proprioception, big long word. It basically means your self-sense, where you are in time and space. We call it your brain's 3D map of you, right? So when you have good proprioception, and proprioception, that sense, right? It's like if I'm standing here and I have my arm straight out to the side and I close my eyes and I bend my arm to 90 degrees, right? Or I bend it more, or I bend it less. I know that with my eyes closed because I have receptors in the joints that are sending that information to the brain about where that joint is in time and space. So good proprioception is when joints have a good full range of motion under all loads and speeds and positions. And our joints can easily get jammed up from, just athletics and life. And when the joints get too, and I don't mean jammed up like a basketball jamming your finger, that extreme. I just mean that the joints get pressed together a little bit too much, and those nerve endings don't send their signal as well. So that joint, that in your brain's map, remember this is like a 3D map in your brain, that area gets kind of cloudy to the brain. And so it'll do things like, it can, everything from pain to inflexibility or stiffness, right? Or loss of some of your strength in your muscles. So that's what happens when you have poor, like proprioceptive input. So those are immobile joints. increased risk of injury, and just decreased movement skill as well as performance. And in the video with the webinar with Dr. Higgins, when you guys went over some of the joint mobility drills to open those joints up and really clear that up. And we've done a lot of this at some of the coaching clinics that you've invited us to.
You bet.
And shown examples of that. So that's proprioception. That's one of the satellites for your brain, right? So another one is vision. So vision is for a human being, right? Vision is our number one survival tool, right? We didn't survive the eons going, like listening like dogs for danger, right? Or smelling like deer for danger. We saw the danger and then we can get out of it, right? So you're getting sensory input constantly, gigabytes of sensory input to the brain all the time. Probably between 70 to 80% of that is visual. We are visual creatures, right? Just, try to walk around your office or your home with your eyes closed. Don't do that, but imagine trying to do that, right? You would move what? Very slow, because you cannot predict your environment very well, and you'd be feeling around and moving uncoordinated and slow. So vision is huge. Now, vision in sports plays a huge role in like ball and field sports, obviously, right?
Sure.
One of the most difficult skills in all of sports is hitting a major league baseball pitcher's fastball. Literally, it's going so fast. It's extremely difficult. We don't think about it as much in wrestling, right? We think about touch and feel, and there is a lot of there's a huge amount of tactile input, obviously, in any grappling sport. And that's a big part of wrestling. But vision still plays a role, right? So if your vision is good, and we're going to talk a little bit more about vision in a second, we'll break it down. When you have good vision, and I don't just mean eyesight, like, oh, I have 20/20, I have good vision, or I have 2400, I have terrible vision. There are visual skills, how well your eyes actually move, pick up information, peripheral vision, things like that. So when your vision or your visual skills are good, you have an increased awareness, spatial awareness. You also have a lot less stress overall to the body, because vision makes up so much sensory input, right? And you have a lot faster and more accurate movements. You have poor vision, your movement's not going to be as fast, as accurate, right? And in some people, because vision is so important to a human being, some people can even have pain that's vision derived. And I mean pain in joints, not just like headaches and stuff. Sounds crazy, and I'm not going to go into it now, but we've gotten people out of knee pain by doing eye drills.
Wow.
Right. So and the important point there is, it is our primary survival and performance tool. So it better be good, right? It better be accurate, and you can train it, right? And you're starting to see it a little bit more and a little bit more. Let's go on to the third satellite here for the GPS, though.
It's great knowing too that these are things that we can work on, and we can manipulate how good we are and how well these things respond for us. That's great.
Right. And you can do, we'll do a lot of individual things for different athletes, where we can do a lot of assessments on them to find where some visual skills might be lacking. But also, there's just general stuff you can do that improves your visual skill, and things you can work into the training regimen for a team, right? That improve visual skills.
Cool.
So the third satellite is your vestibular system, basically your inner ear. I'll talk about it real quick, and then we've got a video a little 3D video that'll give you a good idea. So your inner ear, right? It's basically the thing in our body that orients us towards the one constant in life, gravity, right? So it tells us which way's up, also tells us which way we're going, up, up and down movements and side to side movements. So it's super important, obviously, for balance, but also stability in movement and recovery after really fast movements. Think a scramble, right? Guys are rolling, they pop up. Whoever is ready faster, right, can take the offensive. So that's why the vestibular system is super important in wrestling. poor vestibular system, you got a little bit of dysfunction in your inner ear. And I'm not talking like clinical level of dysfunction, like vertigo. People are probably familiar with that term when the room is like spinning. That's a clinical level vestibular problem. But you can have subclinical issues with your vestibular system that really just result in like, poor movement, slow movement, inaccurate movement, and then some postural compensations too. Meaning, if you got some vestibular issues, that can lead to neck and spinal compensation where you're hunched over a lot, or you actually have some spinal curvatures and stuff. But if we can go to that 3D model, I can talk through that vestibular system a little bit more. All right, so this is pretty cool. This is from an app, a phone app actually I have that I use to explain the vestibular system. So if you go ahead and hit play,
Yep.
Mike, what happens here, right? So this is actually the actual size. Those little white images there are what the little vestibular apparatus looks like. You see those 3 tubes there, right? They're like semicircular canals.
Sure.
And we turn the app to the side so you can see they're directly in from the ear. They're kind of straight back from the head there. And those 3 canals, one on each side, right? Here's the big version. They're filled with fluid. Now, when the head turns, that fluid spins, and that sends a signal to the brain about which way you've turned the head. And so you see in this app, when a canal turns red, it is activating more. When it turns blue, it is deactivating, right? Or sending less signal. Think of it that way. So this guy's turning his head to the right. You see that right, what they call the lateral canal. It's kind of the one that's parallel to the ground.
Okay.
Right, is firing more. So when I turn my head to the right, my right vestibular system sends more signal than my left. That's how the brain knows which way I've got the head oriented. So, super important for just general orientation where you are, but also on quickly recovering from things. Think about slipping on the ice, right? When you slip on that ice and you feel that like surge of electricity through your body as you feel like you're almost going to fall, that's because the vestibular system has been activated so quickly that the brain is sending a massive input to muscles. This is all reflexive, right? This is all automatic or unconscious, to muscles to really try to keep you upright, because the pumpkin hitting the hard ground is not good for survival, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's what this kind of shows, is as your different head movements spin fluid in those different canals, right, in different ways. So when we evaluate people, we'll have them do certain very particular head movements, check and recheck things to see if there's a particular canal that might be a problem. But in general, you can still train all of these, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But we wanted to be able to explain a little bit on on those canals and what they do. And then if you can see where all those canals kind of come together, you can, yeah, exactly, right in there. There's a couple nodules in there that do the other part of the vestibular system. So this system answers 2 questions. Which way is up is question 1. And that's what those semicircular canals do. When that fluid spins, that the brain knows which way the head has turned, right? And it has a good orientation. The other question that this system answers is, which way am I going? As in forward, backward, left, right, or up and down. In that area you were circling there, those nodules in there, that's where we have some little organs in there that tell us that, right?
So that stance and motion drill that we do every day in practice, this is where
massively stimulated.
Sure.
With that. Yeah, exactly.
Really
exactly.
cool.
And we'll tell you, we'll show you a little bit later how you can, the things you can do to improve that, and improve not only the input that's happening from that system, but the processing that the brain does, so that you can have a better reaction.
That's awesome.
When it gets, offset. So those are the 3 satellites, right? And here's what's kind of cool about this. These, when we think of balance, pretty important in this sport, right?
Sure.
We think of balance. Balance is what we call a 3-legged stool. And these 3 satellites are the 3 legs of that stool. All 3 of these things are what contribute to balance, right? So, it's easy to you don't think about vision contributing to balance, but if you stand, with your feet all the way together and then close your eyes, you'll feel yourself sway a little bit. You'll feel your feet grabbing at the ground and stuff like that. That's because your vestibular system and your proprioceptive system are both have to ramp up their input because we've taken the visual system out by closing our eyes. And now we've got to, we've only got those two systems to really keep us straight up and down, right?
Harder to know where we're at and what's going on. Sure.
Yeah. So all three of these systems are literally the contributors to balance. And then, one, they one will contribute more based on different situations, like are you on something flat or are you on something uneven and things like that. But these three systems are what contributes to balance. So first we'll talk about some vision training. Mentioned before, vision's a lot more than just eyesight. We think about vision, we think, oh, I have 20/20. You're thinking about one aspect of vision, which is visual acuity, meaning how clear do you see things. Now, obviously that's important, right?
Sure.
But there's a lot more to vision than just how clear you see things, right? So we talked about already about being contributor to balance, but there's lots of visual skills and more than I even put up here. So if you think about if you have to just track an object moving across, right? You're keeping your eyes on it. That's visual tracking, or what's called pursuits as you follow things. But there's also what's called saccades, or basically snapping the eye. So if I have two targets, I snap my eyes back and forth. My best analogy for this is a hitter in baseball. That ball's coming so fast, our eyes are not fast enough to actually track the ball coming in. We think we are, but we're not. The ball is coming way too fast for a hitter to actually track. He's actually seeing the ball leave the hands and snapping his eyes to his anticipated position of where he's going to hit the ball, right? There's a lot more unconscious stuff that goes on there. So snapping the eyes is actually a visual skill, right? And how well you can do it, and how accurately, right? How accurate can you make that quick snap when something new, comes into our vision, like say a foot after we've pulled somebody in to get them to step forward so that they weight that foot, and then we can do an ankle pick or shoot on that leg, right? So that's one skill. Peripheral vision is literally a visual skill, and super important, considered by some sports vision doctors, right? There's some eye doctors, optometrists and stuff like that who kind of specialize in sports vision, considered one of the most important visual skills. For wrestling, this is actually super important, right? And because not only you have both wide and detailed peripheral vision. So your wide is out, exactly what we think. It's way out here. Can you still see things? And so your mat sense of where you are, where the ref is, where the cameras are these days.
Sure. On the challenge block.
Yeah. Yeah. And where the out of bounds is, right? That, that's important to know, right? And especially these days, I think, watching how wrestling has changed, it's a lot different. So you really have to have a good feel for that. So your wide vision is important, but your detailed peripheral vision is a few degrees, like out to maybe 30 degrees past what your focal point is. Because if you think about it, we have a very small area of what we call foveal vision, or super focused vision, right? So if you're looking at somebody in the face, you see kind of their eyes and nose at the top of their mouth really clearly. If you're really staring at them right in the eyes or right at the nose, you see the ears, but you don't see them super clear. Same with the shoulders, a little less clear. And as you go out, right, it gets less and less clear. Sure. So your detailed peripheral vision, and especially in wrestling, is really important. How well do you really see things you're not looking at? That's what peripheral vision is, right? Seeing things you aren't exactly looking at. So if you have a wider, I should say bigger, so I don't confuse the terms. If you have a bigger detailed peripheral field, right, then you will see things faster in that area. And higher level athletes have a bigger detailed peripheral field. And this is not as huge. It's not like, you're reading a newspaper that's out to your side or something like that. We're
Sure.
talking a few degrees. But in sports, I mean, things, sports happen in milliseconds, right? That's the difference between hitting a shot, missing it, right? If you can gain a fraction of a second on your opponent because you see things a fraction of a second faster, that's what makes the difference,
My
right?
sprawl's a fraction of a second further away, so it's harder for the opponent to suck me in, and maybe that keeps me from giving up the takedown. Yeah,
Exactly. A couple of the other things that listed there: near far focal accommodation, a little less of a big deal in wrestling than like say field sports. That's your ability to focus on something close and quickly snap your vision to a far away target and back again. So it's like the saccades we talked about, kind of, which are more snapping kind of left, right, up, down, that kind of thing, but kind of a near far snapping.
okay. So maybe scoreboard opponent or coach
Right.
opponent,
Right. Yeah.
different depths. Although we always tell our athletes, don't look at the scoreboard, keep wrestling.
Right. Yeah. Just keep making points, man. Yeah. And then hand-eye and foot-eye coordination, which when we talk about hand-eye coordination, we think about things like baseball and stuff like that, but it's a big deal. It's in all sports and in wrestling too. It means, are you executing something with your hands or your feet in regards to what you have just seen? Does that make sense? So I
Sure.
should do a certain movement based upon what I'm seeing visually, right?
Sure, maybe a hand fake. I feel like I need to take my leg back because that's my reaction to what I've seen, that hand fake.
Right,
Okay.
right. So another visual skill that can be trained, right? We'll go to the next one here.
Because it's new, right? The whole vestibular concept, it's kind of new for me. So it's nice to hear more about this so that once we go to the videos, I understand the importance of these drills and the
Right.
benefits.
So we talked about the vestibular system already, right? Your kind of your onboard balancing system, orienting you towards gravity, tells you which way's up and which way you're going. So it obviously contributes to overall balance, but also your reflexive posture. So just from a health aspect, right? A lot of people don't realize that little onboard balancing system is also giving your brain unconscious information on how it should be holding the neck and the spine. So important for that if wrestlers' necks get beat up a lot,
Yeah.
right? And things like head slaps and stuff like that going on. And when we feel that little zinger and we get a head slap, that's your vestibular system getting whacked, right? And that's fluids moving really fast, sending this big signal to the brain. So the faster we can recover from things like that, the better, right?
Absolutely.
For both defense and offense. So what's really interesting about that vestibular system is super tied to eye movements. We'll show an example. We'll show, as we get into some of the examples, we'll show some of that. But your vestibular system, your inner ear, and your eyes are basically constantly talking. And so there's a relationship between those two that's really important for maintaining balance, but also for maintaining your visual focus on things while you are moving, while your head's moving, and while your body's moving, and for your brain to be able to keep you kind of on target, right, while all that's happening.
Yeah, we've got video of those drills coming up, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so an extreme example of when that goes wrong would be being like feeling car sick or seasick. So, and I don't know if you've ever been seasick, but a lot of times
In
they
the
tell
Navy,
people,
of course, I was seasick.
well, there you go, right? Yeah. So and they tell you to, hey, come out on the deck and look at the horizon, things like that. That's because if you're in a boat, right, and you visually you're in, say, a room or a cabin, and visually that cabin's not moving, but the whole boat is actually going up and down, right? So your vestibular system is getting this massive amount of input, like at a fair ride, you know, it's the state fair or something. So there's this mismatch between sensory input. You know, your visual system's telling you this, and then instead of the vestibular system telling you exactly the same thing, it's offset, and your brain has got this, it can't resolve these two different inputs. And that's when and then the vestibular system is actually neurologically connected to your gut, which is why people, you know, feel like they need to throw up or something when they start getting that massive stimulation like that. So it's important to understand that these two systems are very closely tied together and are actually communicating with each other constantly. When you stimulate one, you stimulate the other. I can not move my head at all, only move my eyes, and my vestibular system will actually get input
Wow.
because they are so tied together. And I'll explain that a little bit more when we get into the examples.
Great. You want to go to those now?
Yeah, well, I'll just talk about the last point though. So your vestibular system, that is what really contributes to your ability to recover after really fast or unexpected head and body movements, right? So how well you recover after a scramble, after a roll, right? Or multiple rolls and things like that. That's your vestibular system that's allowing you that ability to recover.
So would some like simple training be have athletes do a forward roll and then get into a stance, do a backward roll, get into a stance, like change that system?
Exactly. So in things like wrestling and gymnastics, you're naturally getting a huge amount of vestibular training without knowing it. To train it even better with the vestibular system would be doing like forward, backward rolls, rolls to the side and things like that, but have a visual target, right? So you've got a visual target, you roll and you have to reacquire that target as fast as you can after you roll. That's literally training the vestibular system.
Very cool. So even just like a spot on the wall, you could draw an X on a piece of paper, anything, and just stick it on the wall. Anything that gives you a focal point.
Right, right. Or with a partner drills, right? So, your partner could be moving backwards as you're doing forward rolls to them, and you're trying to, look at, one letter on their T-shirt or something like that. Every time you come out of that roll, you're trying to find that again.
Cool.
That ramps up the system more and gives you more accuracy and input to that system.
So Pat, as we're starting to get ready to check out some of these drills, it sounds like some of what we're talking about with this visual training can help us get back on track if we've had concussions, whether that's sport related or from just general conditions in life.
Yeah, it very much so. So couple aspects of that. First, a lot of times after you've had a concussion, there is some kind of disruption to the visual or vestibular system. So some of the easy things the that people identify with are if you've had a concussion, a lot of times people have light sensitivity,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that has to do with pupil dilation, right, with the eyes, and so some of the visual things are not working well, or they'll have difficulty um, focusing, which they they'll say focusing. If you ask them like, "What are your problems with the concussion? What do you have?" I just can't focus, can't keep my attention. You'll notice that they can't look at you in the eyes for very long. And then they have to turn away, and then they look back, and then they turn away, and then they look back, right? So
Huh.
actually their ability to do a visual skill called gaze stabilization, also known as staring, right? But able to look at something and keep your eyes there and not it doesn't feel uncomfortable or fatiguing to the eyes. It's hard to recognize as something to an individual. We see it with clients a lot when we test for it,
Okay.
right? But so a lot of times with concussion, you can have some visual dysfunction. Again, not like clinical level, like, oh, I had 20/20, then I got a concussion, now I see 2200. Not like that. Like ability to use the eyes well in a lot of these skills. So we test all these skills when we have our concussion clients come in to see what visual skills they may be lacking. Vestibular is the same way, right? A lot of times an athlete will, after being concussed, will have nausea or dizziness, right? Two different things, but both closely related to the vestibular system. So they may have some issues with that. We test for all that, and a lot of our training, I should say, concussion therapy, is based around visual and vestibular training, actually, to retrain it at the right levels, right? You don't push it so hard that it induces headaches or makes symptoms worse. You do it at what we call the minimum effective dose, right? You do a little bit, but we do it with our athletes right away. So the old, hey, rest and don't do anything and no screen time, that is old school 20th century concussion therapy, right? That modern stuff through research is to get you moving, get you doing things to an appropriate level right away, so you start retraining those systems and getting healthy in that brain, literally in your brain tissue
Is
again.
that why it's so important to have a medical professional helping to track your symptoms and your recovery process?
Yeah, big time, big time. And the importance there is, I know what I would have been like, right?
Yeah.
And like, I'm fine,
Right.
coach. I just want to wrestle. Um, but the reality is, you need to get checked out, because you need to know if something's wrong. Because if it doesn't get addressed, major symptoms may go away, but you may have some issues where you're like, man, I still just don't feel right, and you don't know why, and then it's confusing, right? Or maybe the coach is unhappy with your performance, but hey, you were cleared, so you should be good. You got to get checked by somebody who knows what they're doing, so that you can get these systems looked at, and you have less of a chance of recurrence, right? And of concussion, you have a better recovery, right? And you get back to operating at the level you were before. And really, another big aspect of it is, the, when your visual and vestibular systems are working really well, like when you train them and they're working really well, your risk of concussion is lower. Or if you get one, it will not be generally as bad. Does that make sense?
As it could have been.
As it
Sure.
could have been, yes. You're more resilient,
Sure.
right? You're harder to break.
That's great. So it's not saying that you're not going to get them, but if you did get it, it might reduce the severity of that concussion.
Exactly.
That's
Yep.
awesome.
Exactly.
And boy, in today's world, why wouldn't we want to take a look at something that's a simple drill to be able to help protect us?
Right. Yeah. It is most certainly a preventative measure towards reducing the risk of concussion, or the severity of one, if you get one.
That's awesome. Should we go to the video?
Let's do it.
Okay. What are we seeing you do here?
All right. So these are the saccades, or the eye switches. So I'm just using my thumbnails as two visual targets, snapping them back and forth, right?
Okay.
And you're basically, and now you can do this in a lot of different variations. This is the easiest way to do it, right? You're using your own target of your thumbnails, right? And you're switching the eyes back and forth. We've got some more complicated ones where we use like two strips of paper that have letters on them, and you
Okay.
have to snap your eyes back and forth, reading the letters as you go down, right? So that increases the challenge. Not only do you have to recognize something, but you have to say it, and then you have to find your space again, like, the fourth letter, then the fifth letter, and the fifth letter in this one, the sixth letter, right? So you can make this more difficult in a lot of different ways. You can up the challenge a lot. But
And I
just
can,
doing this itself, just moving those eyes like that, actually, I'm not going to get into a big neurology lesson, but your front brain, right, is highly active when you're doing this drill. So when your front brain is where a lot of your motor cortex is, like for good movement, right? That's where the initial signal comes from. It's also like executive function, decision making, and stuff like that. So
I'm not just getting the benefits of seeing or I'm actually feeling better. I'm moving better because I'm doing this training.
right, yeah, yeah, and so this is a good drill for a lot of for reactive sport athletes. You can imagine like how good this would be good for like a hockey goalie,
Sure.
right? Because they can't sit there and move back and forth. In wrestling, you can't really do this either, right? You've got to be stable and you've got to be able to move around, but have to be able to snap your eyes right, at times. And so it's a great drill for doing that.
That's awesome.
And it can be a preparatory thing too, because it can kind of like almost like a warm up for your eyes, right, before going out in matches. Yeah,
Helps kind of raise all the alertness in general.
we
Cool.
have a high level Olympic level athlete, and she would do this a lot. She would do that drill a lot.
That's great. And it's easy, right? We can do that in any wrestling room. It doesn't cost you anything to look at your thumbnails.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Do I need a
And
doctor to monitor this?
what's that?
Do I need a doctor to monitor this? Is there any
No,
risk?
this is just training. I mean, there are not many, but there are books out there on sports vision training, right?
That's
So this stuff is just, it's like, this is like lifting weights for your eyes,
great.
right? Just
Okay.
making your vision better.
So what are you doing here? I see something with a deck of cards.
Right. So this is peripheral vision training. So there's different ways you can do this. There's a lot of great partner drills you can do, but if you're by yourself, an easy way to do it, I like to throw a tape measure up on a wall, like a cloth tape measure, right? Mark the middle. You see a little like blue dot there. I
Sure.
stand at that point, and then I'm just using playing cards, and I'm bringing them from behind my visual, my peripherals. I cannot see it, and I'm bringing it forward until, while I'm staring straight ahead, until I catch it, and then I can look and see where I got to on that tape measure, right? And then you can see, does that improve after several, 10 to 20 repetitions of that? And then as you train it, it will over time improve, right? So if you do an assessment on where you can see, right, initially, and then you train on this, that will move farther back. Now it doesn't move huge. Not like you're going to move, 8 to 10 inches back and be able to see behind you,
Okay.
right? But it does make small improvements, which have a big effect on your peripheral field. And the one that's showing now is how you train your detailed peripheral vision. So now you'll stand facing, I'm staring at the blue magnet that's on the wall on that dry erase board, and I'm bringing cards in. What I'm actually trying to do with this one is not just see the card, because obviously I can see it when it's out here in my peripheral vision. At what point can I tell what card that is? The ace of hearts, four of clubs, right?
Okay.
At what point can you see enough detail in your peripheral field to tell what that card is? And then you can see how far off from center you were. And again, if you spread this a few degrees, 5 to 10 degrees, you've made a huge impact on your detailed peripheral vision.
So small gains in this visual field really do have big gains in performance and reaction
Right.
capabilities.
Yeah, and what you can actually see. Yeah, those are a couple of visual drills, right? Now, I'll demonstrate one vestibular drill that stimulates those semicircular canals that we were talking about, where the fluid was spinning. We had the little 3D guy, right, and he was turning his head, and this one turned, red, and this one turned blue, right? And basically that meant, as I turn my head this way, more signal comes from this one, less comes from this one. And that's how the brain knows I'm here,
Okay.
right? And I'm not here anymore. So a way you can train that is to, in this, we call it a VOR, which stands for vestibulo, inner ear, ocular, eyes, reflex. The R is reflex. The reflex is keeping your eyes on an object while you turn your head. So the great drill we do for this is having now we use charts on the wall sometime with letters and things like that. You can use the tip of a pencil or pen, and that's what I'll demonstrate here because it'll be easiest to see. So if I hold this out here and I'm going to stare at the tip of the pen, and while I'm staring at it, I'm going to turn my head to the right and then just come back to neutral. I'm stimulating a very specific semicircular canal by doing this, right? And I'm not taking my eyes off, right? I can go faster. That makes it a little bit more difficult. There's more stimulus, than the faster that moves, right? More stimulus to the brain. And I can go, and we train this in 8 directions. So I was just going right. I can also go left. I can go up, down, and then on diagonals. where I'm kind of tracing my nose at a 45-degree angle,
Oh,
right?
nice.
So
Yeah.
stimulate different canals. So if I'd use those 8 directions, I'm stimulating all of those canals and training all those canals. The important thing is you're keeping your eyes on the target in this drill, because that is the reflex. The reflex is that we can keep our eyes on the target while the head moves in time and space, right? And you think about what's going on there, it's pretty intricate.
Yeah.
You've got 6 muscles on each eye, and and those muscles contract to turn the eyes and move the eyes, right? Now, for me to move my head and still be looking there, those muscles are, some of them are contracting, some are relaxing, so that my eyes stay there inside my head while my head moves, right? That's why there's that neurological connection between your vestibular system and your eyes. So chickens don't have a vestibulo-ocular reflex. That's why they go like this. That's why we're here on the food chain and they're down here, right? But so if we didn't have this reflex, just walking, the act of walking would look like a shaky handy cam video. If our eyes couldn't stay inside of our head as our head moved around.
Sure. I remember
Right.
back in the 90s in cross country, our coach used to say, try to keep the horizon smooth as you ran. And working with you guys, I understand it's not just a visual thing. It's actually performance. It's efficiency of the body. It's the way we
Right.
breathe and carry our head over our spine. There's a lot more to it than just that field of vision, but it's a performance concept.
Yeah. And if we relate this right back to wrestling, right? So you're constantly moving, but you're trying to keep a center target, right? You're not just letting your eyes wander all over. That makes you dizzy, right? What do you do when you're on the fair ride that's spinning? You try to lock your eyes. What do they tell dancers and ballet and dance and stuff, right? When they're doing their pirouettes and they're spinning, they're staring at something, right? And then they spin, and then they acquire again as fast as they can, right?
Oh, wow.
That is to reduce the disruption that is going on in your vestibular system with those big spins. So if you can train your eyes to lock in on targets while you're moving, so you could do that drill I was just doing. You could have a mark on the wall or put little letters on the wall, right? Where you have to stare at the letter. And letters work good because you can tell if it gets blurry, right? So you want that letter to stay very clear as you go through different head moves, moving your body just like you are in wrestling as
Sure.
you're staring at that letter. It's an easy way to tell whether something's gotten blurry on you,
It's
right?
great.
Yeah. And even if you don't have, 20/20 vision and you have it on the wall, does it get more blurry, right? So and you want it to be, it is as clear as it is when you're not moving your head. That's your goal when you're doing that kind of training.
And we can all make gains. Nobody's in a spot where they can't make some type of a gain by trying to work on this fixing eye.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, for sure, for
That's great.
sure. And in the end, with that vestibular system, you're basically training to for it to be fire faster and more accurate, so that when there's disruption to it, like there certainly is on the mat, as you're rolling and spinning and moving up and down and getting hit on the head and pushed and shoved, there's constant uh, 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 stimulation to that system. So the faster it can recover and the more accurate it is telling your brain where you're at, then the quicker you'll be, right, to recover from unexpected movements, right? So when you see guys, right, somebody double legs and they get picked up and then they're literally in the air and they manage to kind of spin and twist their whole body, right, perfectly, and come and escape that, that takedown attempt and stuff like that. That's a really good vestibular system that has a really good sense of where it is in time and space and how to adjust the body then to maintain your balance.
So this is the key, is finding a way to build these concepts into our training programs that elevates our athletes' performance concepts. It might even help kind of keep them safe in some circumstances or reduce
Oh
the
yeah.
impacts of injuries that they might sustain. So this is pretty important stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And you can do it pretty easy. It'd be part of your warm up. I'm going to move my computer here real quick. I'm going to show some foot positions that make that drill more challenging. Okay, so when we're doing that drill where I'm staring at something straight ahead and I'm turning my head,
Yep.
right? If I keep my feet in neutral, that's usually where we start with people till they get used to it.
Okay.
To increase the challenge, I make my base of support smaller, right? So now I put my feet together. Now there'll be a little bit more sway when I'm doing those head turns. To make it even tougher, I can go into a tandem stance, so heel to toe, right? And then to make it even harder, I can eventually work to stand on one leg while I'm doing those head movements and turning. You'll feel your feet fighting, right? But that's how we train things, right? We increase, just like lifting weights, we increase the load, right, to make it harder so that we get a bigger adaptive change.
So this is adding load for visual training is just by changing the foot stances to make that more challenging to the system.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great.
Exactly. And then of course, obviously you can do it in wrestling stance and things like that, and what we talked about earlier, where you roll, come out, get your stance and reacquire a visual target.
Sure. So roll, stance, track, or do some of the other drills.
Wow. The real cool thing we'll do with athletes sometimes, even if we're just doing a strength and conditioning session, maybe we might warm up with some visual and vestibular drills. Then we're going into the training, right? And as you fatigue, you go back to the visual and vestibular drills. They're harder to do. So think about what's going on there, right? So you only have so much energy, right? Your brain consumes a huge amount of energy. So for it to keep you balanced and stuff like that, it gets harder as you fatigue. Your vision and your visual skills are not as good as you fatigue. So when we get past kind of the initial stages of doing this kind of training, people get used to it, we integrate it into the training sessions when they're tired, right?
So then fueling. So now we combine fueling and nutrition with this concept. If I'm under-fueled or if I'm dehydrated, my responses, my performance is going to go down. So when we take athletes and try to suck a lot of weight out of them and try to say that we're gaining some kind of a competitive advantage by dropping a weight, we're actually reducing their ability to perform.
Right. Yeah. And just react, let alone the fatigue aspect. Right, your brain, it's like when you're out of fuel, you can't concentrate as well, right? We think of it like those cognitive aspects of attention and focus and concentration, but there's the neurological aspect too of vision and vestibular. You guaranteed you won't be as well balanced, nor will you see things as quickly or react to them when you do see them.
So better nutrition, better hydration, all a part of our vestibular training.
Yeah, better breathing. That's breathing. A whole nother webinar, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready to jump down the rabbit hole with you on that. Yeah. We had a good conversation about that.
Yeah, but that's our brain's fuel, right? Glucose and oxygen are the two primary fuels of the brain, right? So sugars, right, or what our body makes carbohydrates into glucose, right, and oxygen, and those two things are the primary fuels of the brain. And they consume 25%. The brain consumes 25% of those two things in our body. So this little 3-pound mass of jelly is a ginormous consumer, right, of energy. And so when we start to, when we lack that fuel, then nothing functions as well.
It's good. And this is great because, right, if we didn't know that before, now we know it, we can start to make some adjustments to our training to ensure we've got the nutritional values that are going to support higher performance.
Right.
It's cool. Really cool.
Yep. So this is an example of a way you can train this. So I've got a visual target, my little A chart there, right?
Yep.
I'm keeping my eyes on the A, and I'm keeping that target below eye level if I'm standing all the way up, so that when I do those quick drop downs, I'm keeping my eyes on the A, making sure it doesn't get blurrier. So I demonstrated a fast down and a slow up. The one it's showing now was slow down and a fast up. And you can also just do heel pops, putting it about eye level, and then popping up and down on your heels to get that quick little movement there as you're trying to keep that visual reference. So that, that this is a drill that's like the basic drill of training that part of your vestibular system to also maintain visual contact on what you're trying to focus on while you're getting a lot of vertical stimulation. And you could also train this, in the mat, in the room or on the mat, with partners as you're going through level change drills, right? Are you paying attention to what your eyes are doing? Because you should be, because that will make the drill better, right? You will train the system, right? You will train your ability to uh, be less, because when you do a level change, you are quickly disrupting your own vestibular system, right? On
Sure.
purpose. So you can get in on that shot, right? So you can get some Jordan Burroughs going on, right? So you're dropping down, and when you do that level change, you want to be the better your vestibular system is, the faster your shot off that level change is. So to help train that, you integrate the eyes by focusing on, like, so if you're working with a partner, maybe I'm going to do 5 to 10 level changes where I'm focused on somewhere on him or her, right? And you're dropping and maintaining that visual contact, and dropping and maintaining that visual contact. And so that helps train that visual system, or the vestibular system, and the visual, really, to be ready to react faster after you've made that quick disruption of the level change.
It's great. Easy to implement, right? Maybe a little bit difficult to understand. What are some resources? Where do we kind of go from here if we're interested in this stuff? Um, how do you point us in the right direction to learn more so we can start to apply some of these drills and skills, maybe even beyond what you gave us today?
We've got some different things people can read and look at, and then we've got different products for things too. If people are interested in that, a lot of joint mobility things. Our shin box program, some people might be familiar with. We had some great success with some coaches who have used that and implemented that with their athletes,
You bet.
um, and has significantly reduced lower body injuries in some coaches' programs. And but then we have other visual and vestibular training programs too. Yeah, and if coaches are more curious about this stuff and how they could possibly implement it, through the website, they can contact us, and we'd be more than willing to talk about it.
It's awesome. Thanks. And you guys have been such great supporters of wrestling. And I know you did copper videos for us to teach us about neck strengthening and neck stability. So
Yeah,
some of our coaches that saw the copper program since November of 17 probably saw you on that too. Hopefully they did.
yeah. I've had some guys reach out to me actually that were like, "Dude, I saw you on that."
That's awesome. Really
Yeah.
cool. What do our folks need to know, or any kind of last words for us as we kind of wind down our episode today?
Uh, I guess the one thing I would say, we're very brain focused, training system and clinic, and we do a lot of online stuff as well. But there's a lot more, and it's not that hard to do. These things are not really that hard to do, but they are specific training. And for visual and vestibular training, especially, we touched on it before. It really does reduce the risk of concussion. Yeah, and I'll use a one example. This is actually a study done. This is done at the University of Cincinnati, right? D1 football program. They had some success, performance success with vision training with their baseball team for hitting, right?
Okay.
They took some of the vision training, and with their football, this was a few years ago, with the football team, half the football team did the visual training in preseason and then did a maintenance level during the season.
Okay.
The other half of the team didn't do any vision training. They had a huge reduction in concussions in the half that did the vision training.
Wow.
Then they implemented on the whole team, and it was like the next year they had something like, I don't know, 4 or 5 concussions for the entire season, preseason games, practices, everything, which is very small amount for a D1 football team.
I'm guessing a D1 football team seeing dozens of those each year.
Yeah, yeah, and so so you think about, and that was just vision training, right? You go, well, how can vision reduce my risk of concussion? Well, if your visual skills are better, there's two ways that helps. Now, this is me hypothesizing because they said we're not sure why in the study, right? But our from what we know in neurological training, if your visual skills are better, two things are going to happen. One, you will likely avoid collisions a little bit more because you see it coming,
Oh, sure.
because your visual skills are better. Your peripheral vision's better, right? Your saccadic eye movement, how quickly you can snap your eyes, right? When something comes into your visual field, right? You see things faster, so you avoid collisions. But then also, even if you can't avoid it and you still saw it faster, right? It didn't happen to you without you knowing it was going to happen, even though it happens at an unconscious level. So you're braced and you're prepared more, and so the potential, the collision has less of a chance of being a potential concussive incident, right? Because your body was prepared more before the actual collision happened. That you know, concussions don't happen over the course of 10 seconds, right? They
Right.
bam,
Quick.
like that, right? So the if your systems that are reactive, right, they're reflexive type systems, which are visual and vestibular systems, are better trained, then you've got you're reducing your risk of it for sure.
That's great. Thanks so much. The time you've shared with us today and the information has been invaluable. Any last
It's been
words
great.
for our members before we sign off today?
Just take advantage of this time frame and a lot of the stuff that USA Wrestling has to offer for as far as education and stuff, because there's quite a bit, and this is the time to take advantage of it, and think about how you can implement it in your coaching, right, in the coming season and the summer training, which hopefully we can all do, but just take advantage of it now.
It's awesome. Thanks so much. Pat Marques from NeuroAthlete. For all of us at USA Wrestling, Moments Off the Mat, thanks so much for all you do, and take care. We'll talk to you next episode.
Thanks, Mike.
See you, Pat.